And there we have it. I mean, the sheer numbers are affecting the developers as well. We're hearing people from Phantom Blade Zero as well as Wukong being quoted. And yeah, I tried to pull up that article, but it was removed. And I still think it's true. But this is the article that says deny the quote that nobody needs Xbox. So this was on the show floor. Apparently, a reporter walked up to one of the developers. They asked them why their product isn't coming up on Xbox. The developer responded saying nobody needs Xbox. Now, this was not said in English. There could have been mistranslation happening here, but obviously the PC babies came to the forefront and they needed to correct this and come out with an official response that says Xbox is okay and they're just as important. Okay, we see and we recognize Xbox and we are not doing this because blah blah blah. Anyways, that is the story we have. I still believe in my heart of hearts that they went up to a developer, they asked him what about the Xbox version, and he said what is Xbox. So that's my thinking. Doragon, you got to clear up my muckiness here.
I'm not sure there's a huge amount of muckiness. You've kind of covered it. This thing went through 2 or 3 sets of translations before hitting mainstream Western headlines. The problem you face with direct translations, because I don't speak Cantonese or Mandarin or whichever local dialect they were speaking in this China Hero thing. So I don't know how to translate that. I'd have to put it through Google Translate, which does a direct translation. And the problem with such a thing is it loses its nuance. So whereas you or I could say, well, we're not going to develop for Xbox because there aren't enough of them for the cost involved in developing for it to make it worthwhile, that direct translation saying who needs Xbox, it's on the nose, but it's also kind of true. We've seen it from quite a few developers recently saying it's barely worth developing for PlayStation. There aren't enough PlayStation players to make it worth developing. On a good day, in a best case scenario, a game will sell to about 10% of the install base. So those 61 million PlayStation 5s out there, if you absolutely nail it and sell to 10% of that install base, you're selling 6 million copies of that game, which sounds great, but that's barely covering the overheads of making the game in the first place if it's a AAA title. So yeah, it's barely worth making for PlayStation, and when you've got maybe a quarter of the amount of Xboxes out there that you've got of PlayStation, developing for that, it's a bigger ask. It's a much bigger ask. Even developing for Switch is a much bigger ask because of the vastly different architecture, even though there's a bigger install base, 170 million or something, so you'd be selling 17 million at that 10%, it's still very expensive to develop for because you'd have to change the whole way that everything works. So yeah, it's one of those situations. It depends where you start developing. That is obviously your target platform, and the China Hero project is funded by PlayStation for a lot of these guys, so PlayStation is a target development point. But
that's a big point you make.
So that's a big point. PC crowd, there are so many vast amounts of different types of PC, and you've got these handheld PCs that are out there now, so you kind of want to get in on that because it can be an absolutely giant or an absolutely tiny demographic that you're going to get, but it's possibly worth putting the effort in. But then Xbox, where you've got, if it's a quarter of 60 million, what is with the mathematics there? You're selling, what, 1, maybe 2 million if you're lucky, if you absolutely nail it. Most of the time, less than that. Is it worth developing for a platform where you're going to sell 400,000 copies only? Not even break the million mark? And the answer for a lot of these smaller developers, these first-time developers and what have you, unless they are funded by that platform, is no. It's just not worth the development costs for the return that they will get from the platform. It's nothing to do with it not being a powerful device. It is nothing to do with hating Xbox players or anything. It's just cost to return. Is it worthwhile, that developer developing for a box that doesn't have a big install base? And the honest answer for most people is no.